Hi, everybody. Great to see you. I think we're set up as a webinar, so this time we can't exactly see who you are, but yes, we can. Yes, we can. Super. What a fantastic group of people. Hey, Deborah.
Yes, I see a lot of names that I recognize. I'm glad to see people, or at least see your names at this point.
I think you know Ray.
I do know Ray. He's actually 2 doors down, I think. Yeah. I see Agatha, and I see some folks from Moraville and from over on the coast.
I see Barbara from Lake County and Bob Ramsden, who's a new city council member from the city of Grass Valley. Welcome, Bob. And welcome Cassie, who's executive director of the Downtown Association in Truckee. And who else do we have? Kimberly, thank you so much for joining us, Kimberly Pruitt. And I think David Morgan is going to be joining us also from Congressman LaMalfa's office. And we have Megan with us from Senator Feinstein's office. Welcome. And we have a wonderful friend from a previous iteration of Nevada County Arts Council, a very important moment for us all in the arts in Nevada County. That's Penelope Curtis. Hello, Penel.
Hi, Penelope.
I know.
And I see some wonderful artists on the line, Tatiana and Michelle and Khan and Tatiana Allen. That's awesome.
Terrific. Well, thanks everybody for coming in the room today. And my name's Julie Baker. I'm the Executive Director of Californians for the Arts and California Arts Advocates, and also have the pleasure of being a resident of one of the counties here, Nevada County, and also a newly elected school board member. And happy to be here today and just kind of orient you in terms of what we're doing is that this is a conversation. In other words, it will be a meeting style. You will see faces if people choose to keep their videos on, and we will do a short presentation where I'll give you an update on what our organization is doing at the state level. And then we'd love to invite you into the conversation to ask questions, to highlight some of the things that you're either working on, areas that you need, you want to discuss in terms of where you see need for support, whether it's in public policy, funding, resources, and so on. And it sounds like we've got some staff here from many elected officials' offices, including Tom McClintock and Senator Feinstein, and we welcome them here today as well. And it's great for them to be listening in, and we hope that they'll also join in on the conversation. So if we want to go ahead and go to the next slide. And I'd like to introduce Victoria Hamilton, who is our board president for Californians for the Arts and California Arts Advocates, who has a special meeting remembrance that she'd like to bring.
Yeah. Thank you, Julie and Deborah and Eliza. So great to serve with you on this board. Larry Basla, if you've never had an opportunity to meet him or work with him, was the just appointed chair of the California Arts Council. He was the director of the City of San Diego Commission for Arts and Culture, and he's touched so many people through the nation's state and regionally. He was a true diplomat, an arts warrior extraordinaire, an effective change agent, and an advocate for individual artists and social justice issues. He brought joy and light into this world. So we do dedicate Californians for the Arts advocacy efforts in 2021 to Larry's legacy. Thank you, Julie. So Julie, you're muted, so.
There's always one time during the week when that has to happen. So there we go. It's so good to see everybody. And I love that because I know a lot of you and some of you are my actual neighbors. So great to see everyone and welcome. So we're going to do some polls throughout. So if you see the polls pop up, please do go ahead and fill those out. It gives us a sense of who's in the room. We do 9 of these twice a year, regional conversations. It's an enormous state, as you can imagine. So as your statewide advocacy organization for all things arts, culture, and creativity, we try to really, we want to make sure that we're hearing from you and that we are representing your needs and your voice effectively at the state level in particular. We do some federal advocacy as well in our coordination role with Americans for the Arts as state captains. But really today's primary focus is going to be on what's happening at the state level in terms of how we're addressing some of the pain points for what's going on in our sector since COVID-19. Speaking of that, I also wanted to mention we just launched our surveys. Some of you were able to fill those out, our COVID-19 impact surveys. Those were done in the fall between October and November. We had close to 1,000 arts workers fill those out and over 600 arts organizations. And that gives us an idea of a snapshot in time of how we are getting through this crisis. And really what it showed was how critical, and so Congressman McClintock's office can hear this very importantly, as well as Senator Feinstein's office, how critical that federal support was for us for this sector to survive. Both PPP was a top, as well as pandemic unemployment assistance, because so many in the arts are self-employed. So we look forward to seeing funding to continue as we negotiate that $1 trillion package currently. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen if you will indulge me for, I'll try to keep this short so that we can get deep into the conversation as quickly as possible. But I want to give you an idea of kind of what we're up to. I haven't actually updated the deck yet to incorporate our survey, which I will, but the surveys are available on our website. So, but I'll give you some numbers that came out of the Brookings Institution. I don't think I need to remind the folks on this call the devastating impact that COVID-19 has had on our sector. There have been some recent New York Times articles on that, both in New York and also illuminating the Otis report and even our survey in today's New York Times. But we're seeing devastating job loss and economic loss to our sector. In addition, we're also seeing that our sector has actually experienced in California the largest percentage of job loss ahead of leisure and hospitality. Why that's important is so that we can put into context some of our case making when we are meeting with legislators to talk about why we do need to be considered for special relief funding, as well as legislation to support our sector. In terms of what we do, part of our work is to really highlight and to increase awareness of both the good things that we do and also right now, the impact from COVID-19. We recently worked on an assembly hearing. It was about, 3 weeks ago now. And Sharon Quirk-Silva from Orange County is the Assembly chair of the Arts Committee. And so she held a hearing on reopening arts safely, which is actually also the name of our own task force that we've put together of over 50 representatives to talk about how can we reopen arts safely. Out of that hearing, some really specific things have come. One of them, hopefully you've already seen this notice, but in the governor and the bipartisan legislature signed a $7.6 billion package of COVID relief and early action here in the state of California. And as part of that, $2 billion is going to small business grants from the California Relief Grant Program. And as part of that, there's $50 million specifically for nonprofit cultural institutions. I can tell you this is the only sector that was highlighted in the $2 billion small business grant, which means that we are being seen in terms of our disproportionate impact from COVID-19, the first to close, the last to reopen. And those grants will be available probably in about a month or so. We are actually going to be a community partner to Lendistry, which is the company that's been hired by the state to distribute all that the grants and the applications. But this is a big victory, and I thank everyone who signed on to a letter that we put out. About 350 organizations signed that, about 300 individuals signed on also to say that this was important, and you can receive grants up to $25,000 depending on your budget size. And in this case, we also lobbied to actually take off the size of the organization, so any size cultural institution can apply. And that is is part of Senate Bill 87. So if you want to understand exactly how they define cultural institutions, it is in that specific language. Also just mentioning in terms of advocacy, what's really important, again, is to increase awareness of the issues, and media coverage has been something that we've been specifically working on in terms of getting press nationally, as I mentioned, the New York Times today, and throughout the state as well. And that also, we did launch our survey yesterday. And we like to say we put the art in the restart. There's no California recovery without the creative industries. Quickly on advocacy priorities, for many of you in the performing arts sector of the creative industries are well aware that if you look at the governor's blueprint, which includes the tiers that we're in, so purple, red, orange, yellow, from in severe to minimal. If you look at that right now and you look to see what about live theater, when can that open? It basically just says closed on every tier. And that's because the state has yet to issue guidelines for the performing arts sector. We have been lobbying since last July to see that change. Unfortunately, we still are making those calls to try and see that happen. There's a lot of reasons for it, and we can get into greater detail if that's of interest to people, but just to let you know that we are continuing to try and get those. And again, it's not because we want to say we want to open today, it's because we want to make sure that when we get closer, hopefully more widespread vaccinations, warmer months, we are prepared to reopen, and that we have the guidelines that are needed to do that. We also, out of the hearing, actually, we did testimony, and in that testimony, we shared how systemically undercapitalized the arts are in terms of public funding. And let's just focus first, or today, only on California. And in the state of California, for many years, many of you who are on this call probably remember, for over 10 years, we were only at $1 million in public funding for the arts. I think we were 49th in the United States. Due to a lot of the efforts from our organization and our direct lobbying and hiring of a lobbyist, that did change. And over the years, we've now increased to 26 million in ongoing funds for what we call the State Arts Agency, the California Arts Council. However, that's only 73 cents per capita per person in the state of California, which puts us currently at 23rd in the United States. When I testified to that, it was a reminder to some legislators that they didn't like that. So right now, we've just had a budget letter introduced for $1 for the arts, which would actually increase the funding pot to $40 million. That letter was just introduced on February 19th. We're also looking for that to be introduced on the Senate side. And once that moves forward, we'll keep you apprised. So hopefully all of you can help us in advocacy and letting your legislators know how important that is to have funding for the state arts agency so we can make arts accessible for all. Continuing on, kind of our priorities has also been around creating jobs for the arts sector, and also socializing that artists are essential workers and that arts are an important industry, essential industry, particularly to the state of California, when we represent over 8% of the state's GDP, ahead of transportation and construction. So in that mind, we have the governor introduced what was called the California Creative Corps pilot program in his January budget, a $15 million investment in a jobs creation, as well as a strategy to employ artists in service to public health messages in culturally specific and localized fashion. I can get into more detail if people are interested about that. In addition, Senator Allen from Santa Monica has introduced legislation. So that would be a way to establish this as a core program. Think AmeriCorps, but for the arts. Think training, think jobs creation, and think about artists as and arts organizations as part of the solution that we know already we're doing, but actually engaging in this way in establishing it in terms of artists and arts organizations being critical to solving some of our great problems, whether that's climate crisis, whether that's racial injustice, whether that's homelessness. There is a role for artists and arts organizations, and in particular in terms of community health and mental health. We can be playing a very important role. Many of us in the arts know we already do, but this legislation will actually help to establish that, and establish that artists and arts organizations get paid for that work. We also know that once we see those reopening guidelines, we're likely going to see increased costs to reopen some of our venues, which could include things like new ventilation systems, performer testing. Could be as much as, if you're doing a theatrical production, you might need to be testing performers on a daily basis. So if that's the case, or every couple of days, that's an increased expense. And finally, I wanted to mention some other things that we're working on, which is continued federal and state stimulus funding. Again, how critical that has been. Until we're able to reopen, we absolutely cannot survive with losing all this earned revenue. We need to see this stimulus funding come. We also recognize during this crisis how artists in particular are part of our vulnerable workforce. We don't really have the systems in place for artists who are 3.5 times more likely to be self-employed than any other workforce to support them. And so we're looking at what are new systems, new employment systems, new infrastructure to support living wage for artists, housing and food security, and mental health for artists as well. We also know that this crisis, including what happened this summer with the murder of George Floyd, has really shed a light on a lot of what is going on within our own sector in terms of continued systemic racism within our industry. So we need to be thinking about how do we radically reimagine our business models, our hiring practices, our board recruitment strategies and policies, resources and programs to center them in racial and cultural equity. As we're also learning in this pandemic, one of the silver linings has been that many people are putting their programs online and they're seeing bigger audiences for their work. But that might not be yet at the level of professionalism that maybe you want it to be, or maybe it takes a new skill set that we need to develop. And maybe it continues as we go, that we do streaming as we start to also see live performances, but we're going to need to support those types of new business models. And finally, in the state of California, what's important here too is AB 5, the legislation that changed how people are determined as an employee or an independent contractor, and it basically made it very difficult to hire independent contractors. We are looking at follow-up legislation that continues to look at how we can support the arts sector in both organizations that are particularly small budget organizations that are having a hard time making that transition. What can we do to support them? Because we certainly don't want to see these cultural organizations go away. I'm just going to flip forward because we don't have the time to do all of this. We want to talk to you. Is that how can you engage? We've got lots of really great information on our website, including toolkits and templates to help you to engage easily in advocacy to raise your voice for the arts. We do a lot of social media, Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn a little bit. So if you see stuff and it feels you, please share. And April is Arts, Culture, and Creativity Month, and we hope that you'll join us for that. We'll have more information. And then finally, we have some things coming up in March. We'll do, for many people, what we're learning is that advocacy is very new to them, and to understanding how government works is new to them. The budget processes, how does legislation get passed? It's been a long time since we remember Schoolhouse Rock. So we want to bring it to you and make it easy for you. So that's going to be on March 12th. And then tips and tricks to engage in Arts, Culture, and Creativity Month. Again, we'll have toolkits, social media, ways that you can really engage in celebrating what you do, but also amplifying some of the problems that we're seeing for our sector right now, and what can the public sector do to support that. And again, finally, I just want to say I'm very reachable, and if you want to talk about any of these things further beyond what we're doing today, please reach out to me. So that's a down and dirty of what we're doing here in the state of California. And hi, so would love.
Before you go on, are you going to be sharing the slideshow with everyone? That would be great for everyone to know it's coming.
Absolutely. Anyone who registered for this will get a follow-up email with the deck and the recording of this as well. Fantastic. And all of this will be available on our website.
And there are also great links that Jade Elisa has been putting into the chat. So if you want to walk away with some of those links right now, they're available in the chat. And
terrific.
Looks like we have another poll up here.
We do. So please go ahead and take care of that. And so now we're really at this place. That was the bulk of the presentations today. We really wanted to not have it be a passive, but we really want to engage in conversation with you, hear from you. What are things that do you have any questions? For example, of the rapid fire, what I just presented in terms of what we're doing as an organization. we'll start there. Any questions about some of the stuff that we mentioned so far?
It's almost like we need a moment of Zen to gather our thoughts, because it was so much fabulous information.
And that's, again, I'm happy to, if you're more comfortable putting that in the chat, if you're not wanting to, speak up, you're welcome to put a question in the chat, or you can certainly just put your hand up or just start talking, Rob. Look, these are people I know, so I can start calling on them.
Cassie's got her hand up. Cassie.
I do, just because I'm trying to do the poll and it's not letting me submit. So it's just.
Oh, you've got to keep scrolling down. There's more to the poll.
Oh my
Keep
gosh.
scrolling down.
Oh my gosh. Okay. I'm embarrassed.
No. This, Cassie, so what we've learned on all these regional conversations is that you are not alone in that problem. Many people didn't realize that they had to scroll, and so we've had this problem. So again, we're here to, okay. Hey, Robin from the Grass Valley Chamber, you've got your hand up.
You're on mute.
Thanks for all that you do and have done for the arts, especially in our local community and now on a broader scale for the state of California. Go, Julie. So I do have a question. So you mentioned this new program in the governor's budget, the California Creative Corps. Could you give us a little bit of an overview of that program?
Thanks, Robin. I would love to. So, I mean, I'm going to broaden it out a bit. How many of you remember oh God, I hate when it spotlights. Now I have to look at myself. Can we get rid of that spotlight? How many of you remember the WPA or read about the WPA or familiar with the WPA? Great. How many of you are familiar with CETA, the Comprehensive Employment Training Act? Excellent. So it really comes from that origin in terms of how do we employ and deploy artists to be our storytellers, to recognize them as essential workers, and to put them into places to get them back to work. And the WPA started out of our last probably massive crisis, economic crisis, maybe not the one in 2008, but the other one. And it was such a huge piece of who we are in terms of American culture. We still have those plays. We still have those Dorothea Lange photos. We still have the murals that you see. Those all came out of the WPA. Well, there's real movement across the United States for this to happen again. So that's one piece of it. In terms of the pilot program, there's something very specific, which is that we are still in the midst of a public health crisis. We know that one of the challenges we face is that, I'm going to say it, not everybody trusts government to deliver the messages, to change their behavior that we need, particularly in this moment in time, whether that's social distancing, wearing a mask, or getting a vaccine. We also know that COVID-19 has hit communities of color in disproportionate numbers, and they're not necessarily getting these messages or hearing them in the degree that we need in order to get through the crisis. So the governor's program was actually to put a pilot program together to hire artists in local communities who are your trusted neighbors, like Marty Marshall, who's here somewhere, and to deliver those messages and through arts practices. So I'll give you a very concrete example. In Sacramento, they created the Sacramento Artists Corps with CARES Act funding. And out of that, for example, the Visual Arts Corps of the Sacramento Artists Corps created coloring books that were then distributed in food packets that went into local communities. And those coloring books they look like the people in the community that were being distributed in, which happened to be run by the Latino Center of Arts and Culture. So it was your abuela making a meal outside with a mask on, and it looks like the people within your own community. So again, it's culturally specific, it's very local, and it's employing artists. So that was the first concept of the pilot program. And then the broader legislation is really to develop it more into this kind of WPA, along with a CETA model of training people as well.
So of course, what we'd like to do, we have, I don't know how many counties online with us today, but it might be up to, I think we had a potential for 26 counties to be with us. So of course, what we'd love to see is this kind of pilot rolled out at a local level, and how that happens becomes of real interest to us, doesn't it?
Absolutely. I think right now that it's right now it's in the hands of the California Arts Council in terms of the governor's budget to determine whether or not how it's going to roll out. But that budget numbers have not passed yet. There was $5 million in what we call early action, and that has not yet been approved for the California Arts Council for the pilot program. And then there's $10 million in 21-22 budget, which is now being negotiated and gets approved by June. So if that's of interest to you, please do let your legislator know that you would support that program. Cassie.
Well, it's just making me think about our Truckee cultural districts, not Truckee, but our California cultural districts, and what part we can play to help with this connection between private and public partnerships and helping our artists do the work of California Creative Corps. Like, has that been discussed, like utilizing our California cultural districts to funnel some of the funding, and we can leverage that with our local entities that are towns, cities, and private partners that are already funding, which is kind of drying up because we didn't receive anything over the last 2 years, and we were kind of not neglected because anyone was being bad necessarily, but just art being last on the totem pole when COVID hit. So I just wonder, what do we need to do with that, and how do we push that forward? For those of you who don't know me, I'm Cassie, the director for the Truckee Downtown Merchants Association, but I'm also on the Truckee Arts Alliance advisory committee, and the organization TDMA, we put on big events. So totally understand being hit and not being able to support artists in our community. It's been really hard.
So Cassie, in answer to your question though, in terms of cultural districts, I have a couple of things that I would say. Number one is that, as you might recall, last year, the governor put $9 million in the budget for cultural district and to expand that pilot program. And that goes through the California Arts Council. When COVID hit, that was taken out of the budget. And then, of course, you didn't see it reintroduced this year. We are trying to do that dollar for the arts program, which would get the budget up by $14 million for the California Arts Council. And then they can determine where those monies go. So I would say that there's a hope that if we can just increase the pot, we could hope that the pilot program will continue and that they'll look at, increasing that. In addition, in terms of the rollout of the California Creative Corps, at least with the CAC, currently the California Arts Council, I would say that would be something you should directly be letting them know right now. It's actually going to the programs committee. That I wasn't on their call yesterday, but that's my understanding, to determine how, if they get the funding, they would roll it out. And then in terms of legislation with Senator Allen, I am working directly we're a sponsor of that bill. So we're working directly on that bill. And that is definitely something that has been brought up. So as a mechanism. Yeah. Other questions about any of the stuff that we presented?
BJ Jordan has one.
Yeah.
Unmute. Hi, I'm BJ Jordan, Sierra County Arts Council, and I don't know who was listening to the California Arts Council meeting, but and I don't know what Don Harris's situation is with this meeting, whether or not he can talk to us about the California Arts Council, because they have all these new rules now. But anyway, they did talk quite a bit about the Creative Corps. And it was, my impression was that as state local partners, this might be, as you were saying, the chance or the opportunity or the time when we should maybe be thinking about what our approach to this concept and rollout could be. There was also some kind of dollar for dollar thing that they were talking about, which I think is going to be huge, especially for smaller agencies like ours. To try and figure out how to do that when we're not making any money because all our events are canceled. So I don't know if Don can talk about any of these things, but that's what I had to share.
Yeah, I mean, just quickly.
Yes, I can, as a matter of fact.
What's that? Go ahead, Don.
I can talk about it. I'd like to, if the space
Please.
is there. Thank you, BJ, very much. If you listen to yesterday's meeting or if you read the minutes, you'll see the strong advocacy that myself and a few others put forward for the cultural districts and the SLPs, the state and local partners. We feel we have the infrastructure in place to actually get this money out there through you. It's part of our strategic framework that we would use you guys in a much deeper way than we have before. So the advocacy is strong. We had to convince a few others. The direction by the end of the meeting, and please read the minutes, will show that that we did get a lot of support for using the current local partners, getting the cultural districts involved in ways that we have never gotten them involved before. Talking about the Truckee Cultural District, I understand fully that you're an unfunded mandate. You've got this title and really not much you can do with it without any money. So I think it's headed your way. There's still a few pieces to work out, and we have to, as Julie said, get the money approved at the state level and then begin to roll it out. But this kind of advocacy towards me, towards whoever else is on the Arts Council and at the meetings themselves will be very strong. They really do, we really do listen. So that's really good.
Absolutely. Thanks, Don. And it's great to have you here in the meeting and to be living in Nevada County as well. And I think the
right.
BJ, you mentioned the dollar for dollar. That was something that the governor put in his budget proposal, that it does require a match. What we are not clear on yet, either from the governor's office or yet from CAC, as they're determining, is how that will roll out, what that looks like. Is that going to be by as you know, if you're a partner, then you have to match it, or if you know, there was some talk about some of us trying to go out and get those funds in the private sector to begin to match it from the get-go. In other words, instead of it being a $15 million program, it's a $30 million program. So we're still waiting on details on what that looks like. I think everyone's really aware of not putting it on the backs of artists, number one, to have to get that match. And certainly as much as possible, particularly for some of our rural communities where we don't have access to these larger foundations, that it's difficult for us to get that one-to-one match. If the one-to-one match would allow for you know, volunteer time, in-kind donations, that sort of thing, I think also that would go a long way to support particularly SLPs in this moment in time to be able to match it.
Yeah, Julie, if I could jump in on that subject as well.
Please.
I certainly personally support not putting it on the backs of the artists or the SLPs. We think it's kind of an administrative level piece that should happen in a larger scale. We understand artists are not going to be able to do that. They need to be doing the art that they're doing. So that movement is underfoot, and I think the pressure has to be on to say, wait a minute, this is, you know, we believe in the match because the governor wants to double his programs, and I really get his priority there, but it's got to be headed, you know, handled by the right people and not put on the backs of the workers. So we hope to go there.
So Libby has a good question, which is, what if our state local partner is ineffective and we already have a WPA-like program going? Libby, do you want to share what you're doing up in Humboldt County?
Thanks. Excuse me. Yeah, we got funding from our community area foundation to do, you know, because I made the case to them that artists don't just want to be given money, they want to be getting their hands dirty and helping and, you know, really engaging with community. So we did a program which includes also Del Norte and Trinity counties. So the three, Humboldt, Del Norte, Trinity, now have artists who have been contracted with to create public pieces that are geared towards resilience and healing. And you know, we had a lot of applications, and it was a hard choice. So we could obviously use a lot more money and run successive rounds of it, but it's been really well accepted by the community, and the artists are very excited. So yeah, it's just, you know, kind of frustrating because when the money came out from the CARES Act to fund local ethnic and cultural organization, it was like stealth advertised. And, you know, so most of the cultural organizations never heard about it. So it was kind of interesting how it was distributed.
So that's your concern based on where your community, that you're concerned that it really isn't the best mechanism would be to distribute it through your SLP.
Yeah.
If I can conclude, summarize what I'm hearing from you, Libby.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I think that's an important note for Dawn, particularly we happen to have here on the call to hear. And I would certainly, as an advocacy organization, I always encourage you to use your, and I know you do, Libby, to use your voice to make sure that you contact the CAC, who gets to determine how this particular pilot will roll out, in what your strong feelings are, because they only can be as effective as what they know is going on there out in the field. So definitely write to both staff and the chairs and the full council. I'm sure Don will throw his email in the chat.
That, and yes, I will. And also, we have council members who feel like you do, Libby, that are really not pleased with some of the rollouts of some of the who are not reaching. They're just not pleased. So you have some advocates there.
Could I say something to those points? This is Angela.
Please. Hi, Angela.
Hi, Libby. I think you have a really strong point there. And I do believe that the state local partners are a logical vehicle for deployment, but they're not all equal. And I agree with Libby. I think that the requirement could be that the partner is required to come up with a plan. And if the plan is to contract or say that Inc. people will be designated to deploy this program, and that's where the bulk of the funds are going, that's how it's going to work in Humboldt County. It might be different in Placer County, where Placer County's agency could work directly with the Office of Economic Development and Workforce Development Program to make it happen. But the counties are not equal. And also, I have this notion that if the funds are deployed on a population parity, that will help equalize and assist those concerns for equity and reaching all of the people around the state that need to be reached.
So
Libby, go ahead and respond, and then Shantae, I think, wants to also add to that conversation.
Okay, so when we got the money, we got $25,000 to go through the 3 counties, and we looked at doing it by population, and that would have meant that Trinity County got less than $1,500, and that Del Norte County also would have gotten such a small amount. So we decided that the minimum amount should be $5,000. So we gave Trinity 5,000, we gave Del Norte 5,000, and we kept 15,000 because we have 10 times the number of people, and it really worked out well. And it worked out really well because it gave those arts councils a level of visibility that they hadn't had in their communities. Trinity County heard from artists they never knew were there. Del Norte ended up getting two great projects, and one of them with tribal members. So yeah, population is really kind of a trap, because for the really small counties, then you don't get enough to really do anything with.
Libby, I agree. My population parity concept is for the big pie of money for the whole state. And then you have to add administrative fees that are stable around the state. It costs you no less in a small county than a big county to manage a program. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah, we also gave administrative money on top of the award money.
Thank you, Libby and Angela. Shantae, did you want to add into the conversation?
Yeah, hi everyone. Shantae from USADA Arts and Culture. And something that we run into in terms of our lack of visibility to a lot of different communities and other groups is that we don't often get a lot of support from our local councils, the council members, the mayors. They tend not to engage unless they need something from us. ask for assistance from them, whether it comes, in the form of funding or just, sending out some of our info in a newsletter. They kind of give us the runaround, and we don't get support in that way. So what tends to happen is in our community, people don't know we're here, that we exist as a result of that. So if anyone has any advice on how to proceed with that, because it is hard finding that support within the local city councils, because they do have much further reach than we do. And kind of on top of that, with the CARES grant that was available last year, we found a lot of newer organizations that we had no idea were in our community. So it just speaks further to what Libby is saying. How do we extend our reach, and how do we utilize collaboration maybe with other similar arts and culture organizations to really reach out to as many people as possible, and to ensure the racial and cultural equity that really needs to be happening.
Those are great points, Shantae. And I know we've got some city council members here, Gary and Bob. I just because my community, I know I saw both of you. Do you have any suggestions, or I don't know if there's any from Yuba County here, but do you have suggestions on how an arts council could get better representation or support from city councils?
I would just say I have no idea how it works in your city, because every one of them is different, and we all have different people sitting in those seats. I think here in Nevada City, we're really interested. I mean, the arts has been such an important part of who we are, that the conversation is much easier to have here. But it's direct engagement and mutual benefit. That's how it's got to work.
I'll add to that and just say that I agree that it's that one-on-one relationship. I mean, I'm here today because of a one-on-one relationship with Eliza Tudor. But more than that, I think regular contact and providing information about specific ways that we can help. I'm not that familiar with the arts community, although I love supporting the arts. So hearing this conversation today is very helpful for me, but also hearing ways that we might be able to help in our community would also be very helpful to me as a sitting council member.
I would just like to add, in terms of advocacy for the arts up here in Truckee, a lot of what it's that direct personal connection with your chamber and your downtown business associations. Get them on board. And because they tend to have those relationships with town council and with city staff quite a bit, because there's a lot of interaction, a lot of other projects that we work on other than art. But I feel like art is always an underlying need in our communities. And so it's utilizing those partnerships that you have with the chambers and business associations and private sector that have those connections. And it takes a long time. And we finally have our public arts master plan. And I say finally, and that happened, is that now 3 years ago or 3 years ago? And then now we have an arts commission going on. Prior to that, we had a Truckee Public Arts Commission that was under one of our districts, the Truckee Rec Department, because the city didn't have that. Now they know the importance, but it takes that push. But it's definitely the relationships.
Such a great segue to our conversation around specifically around advocacy. And there is a current poll up right now. If you guys can finish putting that poll data in, it helps us to understand whether or not you are actually in touch with your elected officials. As a statewide advocacy organization, our goal is to give you the tools to be effective advocates, and that can be at your local level, your state level, and your federal level. And so if you're feeling like you don't have those tools, or that's not in your toolbox quite yet, please do reach out to people like who are on this call, who are good at doing this and have developed that within their own communities. But I would say that working with elected officials is similar to any kind of relationship development that you would do in anything, whether it's a donor, a patron, but they're also elected. I mean, you are their constituents. So it's really important. So I think, Deborah, you're a supervisor. Can you talk a little bit about what you think is effective in terms of effective advocacy to you as an elected?
Well, it's very interesting because I'm a supervisor here in Butte County, and I have run Friends of the Arts for the last 20 years, and our own county has never supported our arts organization. And of course, now because I'm a supervisor, there's conflict of interest, so I don't even pursue that. But I find, the discussion that we just came out of about arts councils and what they can do and what they can support. Arts councils are like a form of a branch of government, quasi-government agency. We are under a lot of pressure to do things by the book. We are under state contracts. We have a lot of paperwork to accomplish. I think that there's a lot of technical assistance that could occur for smaller organizations that we desperately need. And I remember coming into the Arts Council about 22 years ago at the California Arts Council level, and there was technical assistance offered at that time, but it was just starting to break down because our funding got decimated. That's when Californians for the Arts and some of these other organizations grew up to try to restore that funding. It was cut by 93%. It's taken literally 2 decades to get that funding level back. And in the meantime, the structure of the SLPs has weekly stayed in alignment. It's like, they're there, that, Jerry Brown envisioned the SLP program, the state local partnership program, to be mini arts councils in each county to help do for the state of California, because of its great size, what it could not do for itself. And so these were established in each county. And as someone who ran 2 arts councils, one in Shasta County and one in Butte County for 8 years, I see the struggle. We tried to create a regional alliance called the True North Arts Alliance. And we had 6 counties. We represented, like, the geography of that was larger than 9 US states. And some of us didn't even have broadband, and just trying to get around, in the winter. These are all real issues. So what arts councils experience is no different than what small governments experience, small cities experience, or any other organization that is trying to operate programming as well as outreach to individuals. So I would just say, I wanted to balance that. And then the other thing that can be discouraging is once you create a relationship, that relationship that you create could go away when that person's replaced or does not run again, or that relationship goes away. So you can spend 2 years cultivating a relationship and then poof, it's gone. So there's no silver bullet here. I think that as a society, we have to understand the richness of the arts, and we have to understand what it gives us as a society. And we haven't gotten there, not everywhere. Even though California is the most creative state in the union, we still do not value the arts as we should. And so I'll get off my soapbox now, but that's what I think.
Thank you, Deborah. Chris Murphy? Unmute.
Unmute myself. Hello, can you hear me now? Am I unmute? Okay, hi everybody. Deborah, I would like to jump onto your soapbox if I could. I am from Butte County as well. You may see my name and company, Dream Machine Productions, which is a nonprofit theater that I've just established in December as my way to respond to all of these concerns and needs that have been brought up today. And Deborah, what I would really, really like to do is to somehow, I have a presentation that I'm putting together. I was trying to get a 2-minute presentation for you guys right now to whet your appetite. But basically, I'll give you a presentation about what the presentation is. It's basic, and my background, by the way, I've been doing I've been involved in professional voiceovers for 20 years, been doing video games and all this stuff. Have produced my own sketch comedy shows that I put on, public access channels and things like this. Before COVID hit, I was teaching my own curriculum to offering it to the general public through an improv group that I helped establish here, and through some other organizations, including Butte County Office of Education. I've been involved in programs like in-class trauma-informed arts instruction. I'm working in Paradise, working in some of the rural areas here, working in juvenile hall. So I had all these programs I've been involved in all these things, had all that going until COVID, and then all of a sudden, of course, all that disappears. Now with this growing need so storytelling is my primary approach to doing this. And it's using arts, not just theater, but arts in all of its various forms as a form of communication, actually. So one of the things we need from the public is to shift their thinking of what the arts is from, oh, that's a hobby. Oh, you're gonna sign your kid up for an art class so they can go get messy with the paint. Oh, fun. Or, they can go to a play. It is that, sure, but it's also so much more than that. It is a form of, yeah.
Yeah, I'm just gonna jump in because I think you're preaching to the choir here
Right. So
in terms
anyways,
of what that is. So do you have some specific recommendations in terms of how you think we can shift that perception from the rest of the public around what is, why art matters?
Yes, I have a couple of things. So number one is this presentation that I would like to give to you folks, the folks that have the ears and the ears of the others that I don't have access to as just sort of somebody on the ground. But I do have this presentation I would like to give. Deborah, maybe you can direct me to whom I need to give this.
Chris, I'm putting my email in the chat. So if you want to send me an email, we'll figure this out.
I would love to. Thank you so much. I very much appreciate that. And then as far as getting the word out to those who aren't part of the choir yet, I am actually involved with the second part of the Arts Connections grant that Deborah, you've been part of. And through this, we're actually making a documentary. It's turning out to be a documentary film about the Arts Connections programs that really demonstrates an artist who lost everything in Paradise, going through the process of putting a piece together, a multimedia piece together. And through that, it's very much demonstrates the intrapersonal communication required that words don't touch. They can't get that deep. So you see the artist explaining her piece. She might be here on this call even. And through it, you see her having the conversation with herself.
I am here. I am here.
Oh, hi, Christina. That's Christina Seashore. She's a star of our film. And so, yeah, so Christina, it was really moving to see you going through that process, having that dialogue with yourself, and also using that piece to express to other people, to the intrapersonal communication.
Chris, just so, since we have so many people on the call, yeah. What I would love is if you could send me something. We are going to have these regional conversations, and let's figure out how we can get this plugged in, because as Julie said, you probably are preaching to the choir here. We know the importance of the arts. We need to figure out how to get that message out to a broader audience, and particularly to our electeds and to people who make funding decisions. And perhaps this could be part of that discussion.
Definitely.
Great.
Presentation, documentary film, I'll shut up now.
Thanks, Chris. No, we appreciate your input and your passion, and it sounds like great work, and we look forward to seeing more of that. And Rob, you have your hand up? And then
yeah,
Sarah.
thank you. Hi, Rob Metcalf. I'm a Nevada Union High School theater teacher in Nevada County and our county's 2019-20 Teacher of the Year, which is nice to see our county recognize a performing artist for a Teacher of the Year. It's been a long time coming. So I had a couple of things to share as far as the conversation about how do we shift perception of why arts matter. And I'll be brief. Our school right now and our performing arts programs in both of our schools in the district are really pushing the initially the district administration and then pushing to the school board to increase the graduation requirements around visual and performing arts. Currently, we have a one-year graduation requirement for visual and performing arts, but students may also take a foreign language or a CTE class in order to fulfill that requirement. So they actually can meet that requirement without ever having touched foot or set foot in a performing arts or visual arts class. We'd like to see that increased to where it is more specific to visual and performing arts. We take the foreign language out and we take CTE, as it does not apply to performing or visual arts, out of that requirement. And in addition, we're asking for a one-year advanced level elective as part of the graduation requirement, which would try and get kids to engage in an additional year of visual or performing arts in addition to that first beginning year. So that is something that we're really currently working on. We are also really working on trying to get a bell schedule change that would increase course offerings so that kids could have more opportunity to take electives, because what we're seeing is about a 30% fail rate for our students as a result of COVID and disengagement. And we see that teaching to their heart, which is done through the arts, is the lifeline. And our school seems to be focusing a lot of energy in creating a schedule that allows for intervention. In other words, a schedule that allows teachers to give additional instruction in the core subjects in order to try and bring up students' grades and understanding in those academic areas without addressing the motivational issues that are a result of their disengagement because they've lost their sense of belonging and connection, because they've lost their sense or their connection to art, especially, you know, that interpersonal connection. So much is done over the computers. So that is an advocacy that's happening right now in public education in our county, at least at the secondary level. Thank you for your time.
Rob, thank you for sharing that. And I look forward to learning more. I'm not on the high school board, as you know, but happy to support those efforts as well. So let's talk offline too. Sarah, you had your hand up, and then Angela after that.
Yeah, just so I wanted to pipe in here, since the question was how to advocate to non-artists about the benefit of the arts, and having, you know, been in and around that for a little while, and I feel like we've achieved some success within that realm up here in Truckee. I just wanted to speak to that a little bit. A couple of, I think a lot of it has to do with educating the creatives that are within your community, how what they do is integrated into the community so they can actually act as advocates as well. So basically, advocates training advocates. So so making those resources available can be really helpful. That's where, you know, CAA can actually be really helpful all across the state, because you're providing a lot of that sort of ground level, not just the advocacy itself, but also helping to connect people to one another. Find somebody who has been able to do what it is that you're hoping to do. Look at some other communities and reach out to the people that helped achieve it. And so that you can ask how they went through it. How did you do this? How did you develop this? How did you make those connections? So for instance, talking with people like Cassie, who can speak to those business creative sector partnerships, you know, which is, you know, basically what the whole cultural district program is all about, is creating those partnerships and those interconnections. But you know, being able to have those, the folks that can speak to the different moments of it, like our wonderful teacher that we just heard from, speaking about the fundamental nature of creative education in re-engaging students that are struggling, or engaging students in a different way, because we all, anybody who's been in and around education knows that if you want to see your test scores go up, get a musical instrument into every kid's hands, get them into performing arts, get them into visual arts. All of a sudden things are going to start to open up for people, because it engages people in the way that we know is the most fundamental and essential. So I guess that would be use the people that we have around us. So people that can speak powerfully, like this gentleman that just spoke, people that have achieved what you're trying to achieve. And then, pick people's brains. We don't have to reinvent the wheel.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Sarah. Angela, did you want to add, because you went away? Are you there still? And I just put it while we're waiting for Angela to come back, and I think Eliza had her hand up too, but they both seem to have jumped off. There she is. Was that I did put in the chat, one of the things that we're seeing happening is that, particularly in this last year, there's been a lot of grassroots advocacy happening, particularly in the arts. We've seen National Independent Venues Association start, which helped to get the $15 billion in the Save Our Stages Act passed. We've seen Be an Arts Hero start, those sorts of things. And we've also seen a lot of regional advocacy organizations be created. There's one in the Sacramento area region called SARA, but there isn't really one officially for this particular large North State region. And if that's of interest to people, please do put that in the chat, and maybe that's something we can help to facilitate and organize to make this more formal. Angela?
Thanks. Jade may have posted this already, but I just wanted to remind people that the new federal administration has opened up a 14-day window of time beginning on the 24th to allow smaller businesses and nonprofits with 20 employees or less to apply for a PPP loan. And this helps the smaller organizations, businesses get through the noise of application. Last spring, the largest organizations got there first. So there's that. There's also, through the SBC, an economic injury disaster loan that you may qualify for. So take a look at those organizations that are on the line. That's it. Thank you.
Thanks, Angela, for sharing. And Jade Alicia is always hot on it and puts it in the chat for you. So thanks, Jade Alicia. Eliza?
Yeah, no, I would just thank the idea of like how Sarah, your thoughts were so great about how Truckee has been successful. And speaking with my state local partner, my SLP hat on, I would only say how grateful I am to have been part of the whole inception and conception of Truckee Arts Alliance, which is kind of the advocacy tool that Truckee arts community has been able to put to use to drive those changes, like create a public art plan and hop, skip and jump into create a public art policy, etc., etc. So I think, use my one bit of advice would be use your state local partner. And if your state local partner isn't performing, educate your state local partner on their role in advocacy. It's so important. I mean, I know we've worked hand in glove with the Truckee community to push for the Public Art Commission that's now formed under the town of Truckee. And this is part of our role. And sometimes we just need a little gentle nudge. So I speak to Libby and your concerns over local advocacy. Please keep trying. Partly it's kind of upping the bar on our own performance, and we all need that as individuals in our working lives. But we're here to help.
Thanks, Eliza. That's terrific. And I think, you obviously, because I live here, I know the terrific work that you've done in the terms of Nevada County Arts Council and all the work you've done up in Truckee as well, and making us one county. And that's really important work. And I think that there's a lot to be learned from some of the people here who do really strong advocacy work. That is what we do for a living as Californians for the Arts and California Arts Advocates. And so what we're trying to assess is where are the needs, where are the gaps, where can we support? And if there is interest, as it seems to be, in creating a North State sort of, what are the common through points for all of us? I think in this area is also, we're primarily rural. And we also have a lack of access to some of the funding pots that, sort of the urban areas typically get. So I think there's some things that can really help us to connect and then raise our voices in a more collective fashion, which is always stronger too. So we can follow up on that with all of you and see where we can start to form something like that with some of our fabulous board members who live up here, Eliza and Deborah in particular. So Don, your hand's up. And we're going to wrap up soon because we realize we're already over time.
Yes. I wanted to jump in on the discussion about how to engage the unengaged and how to engage those who aren't on board yet. There's a study done about 5 or 7 years ago. San Jose piloted it. It was done in the Midwest. It talked about the language we use when we talk about the arts, that maybe the arts sometimes puts people in a place they don't want to engage, but creativity, divergent thinking, innovation, there's other ways to get at creativity in the arts without, knocking people over the head with it. So there's some language issues in the way we talk about it and who we include, just to be as inclusive as possible.
Thanks.
Sorry, I jumped off. I was like cutting and pasting stuff from the group chat. Absolutely, Don, I totally support you in that. And we've all been working on developing our toolkits and our case making for the arts. I mean, I think you've seen a lot of really exciting developments in arts advocacy in this last year. But what I can tell you is that it's really, really important that we do actually show up consistently, whether that's at your school board meeting or whether that's at your CAC meeting or whether that's at your contacting your local and state and federal electeds. I'll say this 100 times over, which is that if they don't know there's a problem, and they don't know there's a problem that they need to solve, they're not going to just solve it for you. So you have to show up and explain to them that there's a problem, and then work with them to support in what ways that you can to move that forward. So here are some things we just wanted to share as we wrap up on this Friday afternoon, and hopefully everyone gets a moment to go out inside and enjoy this beautiful sunshine, which is that we have some great events coming up. Again, Arts Advocacy and Government 101. If you're a part of the over 30% who said they haven't reached out to an elected official in these last quarter, and maybe that's because you're not familiar or comfortable doing that, then come to that particular session. I hope that would be very helpful for you. Also, if you run a nonprofit and you're not sure what you can or cannot do as a nonprofit in terms of advocacy or lobbying directly, we will also speak to that at that particular event. All of these events are free. Advocacy in Action, Your Voice Needed is Needed in April, Arts, Culture, and Creativity Month, so join us there. And then we'll have a lot of activities during the month of April, including Advocacy Week, where we will virtually meet with our electeds, and a full day convening of networking, panels, performances, and workshops on our virtual conference on April 27th. So I want to thank everyone for joining today and invite Deborah and Eliza to close it out. So thank you so much.
Well, I just wanted to tell everybody thank you. My brain is split down the middle now. It's like arts and politics, and it's so interesting because arts prepared me for politics. I thought the arts were hard, and then politics got really hard. So I think though that the arts have a lot of answers for us as the human race. And particularly up here in the North State, I love the idea of a regional arts advocacy organization. I just want to remind people though that most arts are volunteer run. Most arts organizations are volunteer run. And you cannot maintain consistency with volunteer status. So we have to professionalize what we're doing. And that needs to be a message to our electeds.
And get more money for the arts so that we can professionalize it and pay people the wages that they deserve. So help us to get that $1 for the arts this year, please.
And I think it's got a lot to do with demystifying what the idea of politics is. I mean, go back to Plato, who created the whole argument for politics. It was about diplomacy. It was about relationship building. Everything that Gary is nodding his head about, and Bob and Deborah, seriously, it's about relationship building. So let's demystify this, because there are good people in politics. There are fantastic people in the arts. We just have to keep talking and keep informing in the most sort of articulate way that we can. Thank you all so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.